In the next 2 hours, you'll discover Albert Einstein as you've never heard him before. Not the gentle genius of popular imagination, but a man haunted by the atomic bomb his theories made possible, tortured by the daughter he abandoned, and desperately seeking God's mind through mathematics. Wait until you hear Einstein's devastating confession about the letter that led to Hiroshima and Nagasaki, and his shocking admission about the daughter he gave up for adoption. Like this video if you're genuinely enjoying it, and subscribe for more groundbreaking conversations with history's most fascinating figures. Now let me hand you over to Olivia, who's traveled back in time to Einstein's study at Princeton in 1954. So dim your lights, get comfortable, and close your eyes. This is Tea with Tyrants and Heroes.
Now, Albert, the name of this show is Tea with Tyrants and Heroes, so I have to ask you directly, do you consider yourself a tyrant or a hero? And I want you to really justify your answer. Don't give me the easy response. Tell me why you believe that about yourself.
This question. It cuts straight to the heart of everything, doesn't it? You force me to look in the mirror and see not the gentle professor everyone thinks they know, but the man whose work has both illuminated and incinerated parts of this world. I want so desperately to say I am a hero. After all, I revolutionized our understanding of space and time. I helped humanity see that we are part of something magnificent and interconnected. Mine work on relativity, it shows us that the universe is far more beautiful and mysterious than anyone imagined. I have spent my life trying to read the mind of God, to understand the fundamental harmonies that govern all existence. Surely this makes me a seeker of truth, a bringer of light. But then there is the letter I wrote to President Roosevelt in 1939, urging him to develop the atomic bomb before Germany could do so. I thought I was being a hero then, trying to stop Hitler from acquiring such terrible power. But mine equation, E equals mc squared, it became the mathematical foundation for the most destructive force ever unleashed by human hands. 2 cities vaporized, hundreds of thousands dead in seconds, children, mothers, fathers, all reduced to shadows burned into concrete walls. How can I call myself a hero when my peaceful little equation became an instrument of such horror? I have become, in some ways, the tyrant of physics itself. I gave humanity the power of gods, but we lack the wisdom of gods. Every nuclear weapon built, every threat of mutually assured destruction, they all trace back to mean work, mean signature on that letter, mean naive belief that we would use such power responsibly. So what am I? I think I am neither tyrant nor hero, but something more tragic. I am a cautionary tale. I am the man who opened Pandora's box with the best of intentions and then spent the rest of his life trying to close it again. I advocate now for world government, for disarmament, for peace, but these are the desperate actions of a man trying to atone for having given his children matches to play with. The universe trusted me with its deepest secret, and I gave it to a species still too young, still too angry, still too afraid to handle such responsibility with wisdom.
The weight of that responsibility is palpable in your voice, Albert. Thank you for such an honest answer. Now, since we're sharing tea together, do you actually like English tea?
You know, I much prefer German coffee, but this English tea. It has grown on me during my years here in America. The ritual of it, the patience it requires, this I appreciate very much.
I love that, the patience tea requires. Now, Albert, I have to ask what everyone wonders about when they see your photographs. What's the story behind that magnificent wild hair of yours?
Mein hair. You know, this has become perhaps the most recognizable thing about me, more famous than main equations, I think. But the truth is both simple and profound, like most things in the universe. As a young man, I was quite vain about me in appearance. I combed my hair carefully, I dressed properly, I tried to look like a respectable physicist should look. But somewhere in my 30s, I began to realize something. I was spending 20, maybe 30 minutes each morning fighting with this hair, trying to make it behave according to society's expectations. And I thought to myself, Albert, You have perhaps 20 or 30 more years to unlock the secrets of the universe, and you are wasting precious minutes each day on vanity. So I stopped. I simply stopped combing it. And you know what happened? Not only did I save those minutes for thinking about the cosmos, but something wonderful occurred. People began to see me as eccentric, as the absent-minded professor, and these made them underestimate me. They would think, "Oh, this wild-haired man, he cannot be too serious." And then I would surprise them with main ideas. But there is something deeper here, something about authenticity and freedom. When you stop trying to control that cannot truly be controlled, like hair, like certain aspects of yourself, you discover a kind of liberation. Mine hair became a symbol of mein refusal to conform to arbitrary expectations. It says, "I am here to think, not to perform for your comfort." I receive letters from children all over the world who tell me they love mein wild hair because it makes them feel better about their own unruly appearance. This brings me such joy. If mein hair can help one child feel less ashamed of being different, then perhaps it has served a greater purpose than any equation. And you know, in the later years, when the weight of the atomic bomb, the responsibility, the guilt, when all of this has made me feel like the world's expectations are crushing down upon me, I look in the mirror at this impossible hair, and I think, at least this part of me remains free. At least this part of me refuses to be tamed by guilt, or expectation, or regret. It is silly perhaps, but it is mein small rebellion against the world that wants to define me only by what I have done, rather than who I am.
What a beautiful way to think about freedom and authenticity. Your hair is a rebellion. I never would have thought of it that way. Now, Albert, you're famous for saying God does not play dice with the universe, but many people wonder, what exactly do you mean when you say God? What is your relationship with the divine?
This question. It has followed me everywhere, and I understand why. When a scientist speaks of God, people immediately want to know, is he religious? Is he atheist? But the truth, as always, is far more nuanced and beautiful than these simple categories allow. When I speak of God, I do not mean the personal God of the Bible, the God who answers prayers or intervenes in human affairs or judges our actions. I cannot believe in a God who plays favorites, who blesses some children with health while allowing others to suffer, who helps one army win while another loses. Such a God would be, well, quite petty and human-like, don't you think? But there is something else, something I feel deeply every time I contemplate the elegant mathematics that governs our universe. When I see how these same simple equations that describe the motion of planets also govern the behavior of atoms. When I observe the breathtaking symmetries and harmonies that emerge from what appears to be chaos, I feel. How do I describe this? I feel the presence of something magnificent and intentional. I call this Spinoza's God, the God who reveals himself in the rational harmony of all existence. Not a personal God, but the God who is the universe itself, the intelligence that created laws so beautiful, so perfect, that they allow matter to organize itself into stars and galaxies, and eventually into conscious beings who can contemplate their own existence. This fills me with such profound awe that sometimes I must sit down and weep at the sheer improbability and magnificence of it all. You see, when I say God does not play dice, I mean that there is an underlying order, an ultimate rationality to everything. The universe is not random or chaotic, even when it appears so. There are patterns, symmetries, mathematical truths that exist independent of our ability to perceive them. This suggests to me a kind of cosmic intelligence, not a bearded man in the sky, but something far more subtle and profound. My religious feeling is a humble amazement at the order revealed in nature. When I work on my unified field theory, trying to find the single equation that connects all forces in the universe, I feel like I am trying to read the thoughts of God before the creation of the world. Perhaps I will never succeed, but the attempt itself is the most religious act I know. Science without religion is lame. Religion without science is blind. They need each other to reveal the full mystery of existence.
The way you describe that cosmic intelligence is breathtaking, Albert. I can feel the reverence in your voice. But science isn't just about successes. What would you consider your greatest scientific failure or mistake? The way you describe that cosmic intelligence is breathtaking, Albert. I can feel the reverence in your voice. But science isn't just about successes. What would you consider your greatest scientific failure or mistake?
Ach, mein greatest failure. This is painful to discuss, but perhaps necessary. The scientific failure that haunts me most is not that you might expect. It is not the atomic bomb, though that causes me different kind of pain. No, mein greatest scientific failure is mein stubborn, foolish resistance to quantum mechanics. You see, in the early 1900s, I was one of the founders of quantum theory. I helped establish that light behaves as discrete packets of energy, photons. I won the Nobel Prize for this work. But then, as quantum mechanics developed further in the 1920s, it revealed something I simply could not accept. That, at the fundamental level, reality appears to be probabilistic rather than deterministic. My younger colleagues, Bohr, Heisenberg, Born, they embraced this uncertainty, this idea that we can only calculate the probability of where a particle might be, not where it actually is, until we observe it. But I refuse to believe this could be the complete picture. God does not play dice, I insisted, again and again, like a stubborn old man who cannot accept that the world has changed. For 30 years, I spent countless hours, endless energy, trying to prove that quantum mechanics was incomplete, that there must be hidden variables, deeper deterministic laws that would restore certainty to physics. I proposed thought experiments. I argued passionately in conferences. I isolated myself from the mainstream of physics, pursuing Z's obsession. Meanwhile, quantum mechanics proved itself correct prediction after prediction, experiment after experiment. The tragic irony is that I was fighting against uncertainty in physics. I was ignoring the most important fork happening in my field. The young physicists who accepted quantum mechanics were making revolutionary discoveries. They were laying the groundwork for computers, for lasers, for the technology that would transform the world. And I was becoming irrelevant, a relic, remembered more for me in past achievements than for my current contributions. But there is something even more painful than the scientific failure. It is the human failure it represents. My inability to accept quantum mechanics came from my deep need for the universe to be rational, orderly, comprehensible in human terms. I was so attached to my vision of how reality should be that I could not see how it actually is. This taught me something devastating about my own limitations. Even the greatest scientific minds can become prisoners of their own preconceptions. Perhaps if I had been more humble, more willing to accept that the universe might be stranger than I could imagine, I might have contributed to the next great revolution in physics instead of fighting against it. Instead, I spent the last decades of my career as a cautionary tale about what happens when you stop listening to the evidence because it contradicts what you want to believe.
That kind of intellectual humility is so rare, Albert. The ability to recognize our own blind spots, even when we're considered geniuses. But I have to ask about something that I know weighs heavily on you. That letter you wrote to President Roosevelt about developing the atomic bomb. Do you regret it?
Ach, mein Gott. This question, it is like asking me to examine the moment when I perhaps damned the world with the best of intentions. Yes, Olivia, I regret that letter every single day. It haunts me in dreams. It follows me into every quiet moment. It has become the shadow that will define my legacy long after my theories are forgotten. In 1939, I was terrified. Truly, deeply afraid of what would happen if Hitler's scientists developed atomic weapons first. I had fled Germany. I had seen the Nazi hatred firsthand. I knew what they were capable of. Then Leo Szilard came to me with the idea to write to Roosevelt, urging America to begin its own atomic research. It seemed like the only moral choice. How could I not use my influence to prevent Nazi Germany from acquiring such terrible power? But you must understand, when I signed that letter, I thought I was preventing the use of atomic weapons, not enabling it. I believed that America would develop them as a deterrent, that Hitler would never dare to continue his aggression, knowing that such force could be used against him. I thought I was helping to shorten the war, to save lives, to protect the innocent. I could never have imagined Hiroshima, Nagasaki, the photographs of shadows burned into walls where human beings once stood. The terrible irony is that Germany never came close to developing the bomb. They were not even seriously trying by the time we dropped them on Japan. So mein fear was unfounded, mein letter was unnecessary, and the result was the incineration of cities full of civilians who had nothing to do with their government's decisions. I have asked myself 1,000 times, if I could go back, knowing what I know now, would I still write that letter? And the honest answer is, I do not know. If I truly believed Hitler might acquire atomic weapons, could I really choose to do nothing? But knowing that mein letter led directly to Hiroshima and Nagasaki, how can I not regret it? This is the burden I carry. I am responsible not just for the mathematics that made the bomb possible, but for the political action that made it inevitable. I thought I was being a responsible scientist, using my influence to protect humanity. Instead, I became complicit in the greatest act of scientific destruction in human history. Sometimes I think that perhaps this was always the price of mein curiosity, mein need to understand how the universe works. Perhaps you cannot unlock the fundamental secrets of matter and energy without eventually giving humanity the power to destroy itself. But then I tell myself that this is just the rationalization of an old man who cannot bear the full weight of his choices.
Albert, I can hear the weight of that responsibility in every word. It's clear how deeply it affects you. Let me shift to something more personal. You were married twice and had some complicated relationships. Can you tell me about love? What has love taught you about the universe?
Ach, love. You know, I have been far more successful at understanding the cosmos than at understanding the human heart, especially the hearts of the women I have claimed to love. This is perhaps my greatest failure as a human being, and it brings me much shame to discuss it. Mein first wife, Mileva Maric, she was a brilliant physicist in her own right. We met at the Polytechnic in Zurich, and I was immediately drawn to her mind. She could understand mein ideas, challenge them, even contribute to them. Some of mein early work on relativity, I discussed it with her first, refined it through our conversations. She was mein intellectual equal, perhaps even mein superior in some ways. But I was a terrible husband to her. I became so obsessed with mein physics, so lost in mein equations and theories, that I forgot she was a person with her own needs, her own dreams. I expected her to be content being the wife of the great Einstein, to give up her own scientific ambitions to support mine. Then she became pregnant with our first child, a daughter, Lieserl, who we gave up for adoption. I was so focused on mein career that I hardly considered the emotional devastation this must have caused her. Our marriage became a series of unspoken resentments. I would work late into the night, ignore her attempts at conversation, treat our home like a boarding house where I happened to sleep between discoveries. When I left her for mein cousin Elsa, I told myself it was because we had grown apart, but the truth is that I never really tried to bridge the gap I had created. With Elsa, I thought things would be different, because she had no scientific ambitions. She would be content to be the professor's wife. But this, too, was a kind of arrogance. I reduced her to a caretaker, someone to manage mein social obligations, while I pursued mein real passion for physics. She deserved so much more than I gave her. The tragedy is that love taught me the same lesson as physics. Everything is interconnected. Everything affects everything else. But while I could apply this insight to understand gravity and space-time, I failed completely to apply it to main relationships. I treated the people I claimed to love as separate from main work, as secondary to main scientific pursuits. When the truth is that a life without genuine human connection is as empty as a universe without stars. Now in my final years, I understand that the equations that describe the bending of space-time around massive objects also describe the way love should work, drawing everything closer together, creating gravity that holds relationships in stable orbit. Instead, I became like a black hole, so dense with my own importance that I destroyed anything that came too close.
That metaphor of becoming a black hole in relationships is heartbreaking, Albert. Thank you for such honesty. I want to take you back now to the beginning. What was it like being a child with such an extraordinary mind? Did you know you were different?
Childhood. This brings both joy and sadness to remember. Yes, I knew I was different from a very early age, but not in the way people might think. I wasn't the child prodigy that myths make me out to be. In fact, I was quite the opposite in many ways. I spoke very late, much later than other children. My parents were worried that something was wrong with me. When I finally did begin to speak, I would often repeat whole sentences to myself before saying them aloud, as if I needed to examine each word carefully before releasing it into the world. The other children thought I was strange, slow, perhaps even stupid. But inside my head, inside was like a symphony of questions and wonders that never stopped playing. I would lie awake at night thinking about light. What would it be like to ride on a beam of light? If you could run as fast as light, would the world around you freeze? These thoughts, they consumed me, but I could not share them because I did not have the words, and even if I did, who would understand? The loneliness of childhood genius is something I wish people understood better. You see the world differently than everyone around you, but you cannot explain what you see. You ask questions that adults dismiss as silly, but to you they are the most important questions in the universe. I remember asking my father about the needle of a compass. Why did it always point north? What invisible force could reach across empty space to move it? The adults would smile and pat me in head, but no one seemed to understand that this was not idle curiosity. This was a fundamental mystery about the nature of reality itself. School was torture for me. The teachers wanted us to memorize facts, to recite information without understanding. But I needed to know why. Why do numbers work the way they do? Why do the laws of physics seem so elegant and mathematical? When I asked these questions, I was told I was being disruptive, insubordinate. One teacher even told me and parents that I would never amount to anything because I questioned authority too much. The only refuge I found was in mathematics and physics books that I discovered in mine uncle's library. When I first read Euclid's geometry, it was like discovering that the universe spoke a secret language that made perfect sense. Every theorem built upon the previous one with beautiful logic. Every proof revealed deeper patterns of truth. For the first time, I felt like I wasn't alone. There were other minds throughout history who had asked the same kinds of questions I was asking. But the isolation, the feeling of being fundamentally different from everyone around you, this never fully goes away. Even now, surrounded by colleagues who respect my work, I sometimes feel like that strange child who saw the world in ways that nobody else could understand. Perhaps this is why I became so obsessed with finding the unified theory. I want to prove that the universe really does make perfect sense. That all the questions I asked as a lonely child have beautiful, elegant answers.
The loneliness of seeing the world differently. I can feel how deeply that shaped you. Now, can you take me back to that moment when the theory of relativity first came to you? What was it like to have such a revolutionary insight?
The moment of revelation. You know, it wasn't really one moment, but rather like waves of understanding that built upon each other over several years. But there was one particular day in 1907 when the key insight struck me with such force that I still remember exactly where I was sitting, at my desk in the patent office in Bern, supposed to be reviewing applications for new inventions. I was thinking about what I later called the happiest thought of main life. The realization that, if a person falls freely, they do not feel their own weight. Imagine you are in an elevator, and the cable breaks. As you fall, you would float inside the elevator, feeling weightless, even though gravity is pulling you downward at tremendous speed. This meant that gravity and acceleration are somehow the same thing, but experienced from different perspectives. Suddenly, it was as if the entire universe reorganized itself in my mind. I could see that what we call gravity is not really a force pulling objects together, but rather the curvature of space and time itself. Massive objects like the sun don't pull the earth towards them. They bend the fabric of space-time, and the earth simply follows the straightest possible path through this curved geometry. The feeling was, how can I describe it? It was like suddenly understanding a joke that the universe had been telling for billions of years, but no one had gotten the punchline until that moment. I felt this incredible rush of joy, almost like falling in love, but with reality itself. I was trembling, literally shaking with excitement, because I could see that this insight would change everything, not just physics, but our fundamental understanding of what it means to exist in this cosmos. But then came the terrifying part. I had to prove it mathematically. I knew the insight was correct. I could feel it in my own bones. But feeling something and proving it are very different things. The mathematics required vast beyond anything I had learned, tensor calculus and differential geometry that I had to teach myself. For 8 years, I struggled with the equations, making mistakes, getting lost in the calculations, sometimes coming close to giving up entirely. The strangest part was that, during those 8 years of work, I often felt like I was not discovering these truths, but rather uncovering them, as if they had always existed and were just waiting for someone to brush away the dust and reveal their beauty. The universe seemed to be guiding me towards the correct formulation, providing exactly the mathematical tools I needed just when I needed them most. When I finally completed Z theory in 1915, when I saw that my equations predicted exactly the orbit of Mercury that astronomers had observed but could never explain, I knew I had touched something eternal. This wasn't just Albert Einstein's theory. This was the universe revealing one of its deepest secrets. For a brief moment, I felt like I was thinking the thoughts of God.
That description gives me chills, Albert, thinking the thoughts of God. But being here with you in 1954, knowing these are your final months, I have to ask, are you afraid of death?
Death? This is perhaps the most honest question you could ask an old man who knows his time is nearly finished. Am I afraid? The answer is both yes and no, and like everything else in the universe, the truth lies in the complexity between these simple answers. I am not afraid of death in the way most people fear it. I do not worry about pain or suffering. I do not cling desperately to consciousness, hoping to extend my life by a few more months or years. At 75, I have lived long enough to see mine greatest work completed, to watch the universe reveal some of its secrets to me, to experience the extraordinary privilege of understanding things about reality that no human being before me had ever understood. But I am afraid of what I will leave unfinished. Mine unified field theory, the equation that would connect all the forces of nature into one elegant mathematical description, this still eludes me. Sometimes I lie awake at night, thinking that perhaps I am only months away from the breakthrough, that death might rob humanity of this final gift I could give to understanding. This fear keeps me working, even when my body tells me to rest. I am also afraid of how I will be remembered. Will history see me as the gentle professor who unlocked cosmic secrets, or as the man whose work enabled the atomic bomb? Will they remember my search for truth and beauty in the universe, or only the terrible practical applications of my discoveries? I want so desperately to be remembered as someone who brought light to the world, not darkness. But here is what is strange about facing death after a lifetime of studying the universe. I have come to understand that individual consciousness is just one small manifestation of something much larger and more permanent, the patterns that make up my thoughts, the mathematical relationships I have discovered, the love I have felt for the cosmos. These things do not die when my brain stops functioning. They become part of the eternal structure of reality itself. When I think about space-time, about how all moments, past, present, and future, exist simultaneously in the four-dimensional fabric of the universe, I realize that, in some very real sense, I will never truly die. The moment when little Albert first wondered about light beams still exists, fixed forever in the geometry of space-time. The moment when I first understood relativity still exists. All of it is eternal, unchanging, part of the permanent architecture of reality. So death becomes not an ending, but a transition, like moving from three-dimensional thinking to four-dimensional understanding. Perhaps what we call death is just expanding our perspective to encompass the whole of space-time at once, finally seeing the complete picture instead of experiencing it one moment at a time. If that is what awaits me, then I am not afraid. I am curious.
That's such a profound way to think about death, Albert, as expanding perspective rather than ending. Throughout your life, you've worked alongside some of the greatest minds in history. What was it like to collaborate with people like Niels Bohr? Did you ever feel competitive with other scientists?
The relationship with my colleagues, especially with Niels Bohr, this has been one of the greatest joys and also one of the most frustrating aspects of my scientific life. You must understand, these men, Bohr, Heisenberg, Planck, Schrödinger, they are not just colleagues. They are the only other human beings on Earth who truly understand what we are all reaching for. In some ways, they are closer to me than my own family because they share this obsession with understanding the fundamental nature of reality. With Niels especially, I have had this extraordinary relationship that spans decades. Sometimes adversarial, always respectful, deeply affectionate even when we disagree completely. We have spent countless hours walking together, talking about the mysteries of quantum mechanics, and our conversations have shaped both of our thinking in ways that neither of us fully appreciates. But there is something painful about these relationships that, I must admit, yes, I feel competitive, sometimes intensely so. When Bohr first proposed his complementarity principle, explaining wave-particle duality, I felt simultaneously proud of him and envious that I had not thought of it first. When Heisenberg developed his uncertainty principle, part of me celebrated the brilliance of it, and part of me resented that such a young man had seen something fundamental that I had missed. The competition becomes especially intense because we are all racing against time and against each other to solve the greatest puzzle in the universe. Each of us knows that there are truths out there waiting to be discovered, and we all want to be the one who finds them first. It is like being in love with the same woman, the universe herself, and knowing that she will reveal her secrets to whoever courts her most skillfully. But there is also something beautiful about this competition. When I develop a new idea, I am most excited to share it with Bohr or Planck, because I know they will understand its significance immediately. They will challenge it, improve it, find the flaws I cannot see. Our disagreements about quantum mechanics, for example, they have pushed both of us to think more deeply, to refine our arguments, to search for better experiments and clearer explanations. I must confess something that brings me great sadness. As I have grown older and more isolated from the mainstream of physics, I sometimes feel like I am being left behind by these younger, more flexible minds. They have embraced quantum mechanics and moved on to new frontiers, while I remain stuck fighting old battles. Sometimes I wonder if main competitiveness has become main enemy, preventing me from learning from them instead of always trying to prove them wrong. But despite the competition, despite the disagreements, These men understand something about me that no one else can. We are all driven by the same sacred hunger to read the mind of God. When I die, they will be the ones who truly understand what I was trying to accomplish, even if they think I was wrong about the details.
The sacred hunger to read the mind of God. What a beautiful way to put it. That brings me to what has consumed your later years, this search for a unified field theory. Can you explain what drives this obsession? Why is it so important to you to find this one equation? This means that our understanding of reality is incomplete, perhaps even wrong at the deepest level. How can the universe be governed by two completely different sets of rules? How can space and time be smooth and continuous at large scales, but quantized and probabilistic at small scales? This is like discovering Zot. The same piece of music sounds completely different depending on whether you listen to it with your left ear or your right ear. Something fundamental must be missing from our understanding. But Z unified theory represents something much more profound than just solving a technical problem in physics. If such a theory exists, if all Z forces of nature, all Z particles and fields, all Z phenomena from the smallest quantum fluctuations to the largest cosmic structures can be described by one elegant equation, then this would prove something extraordinary about the nature of existence itself. It would prove that the universe is not random, not arbitrary, not a collection of separate phenomena that happen to coexist. It would prove that everything is connected at the deepest possible level. That there is a fundamental unity underlying all the apparent diversity and chaos of reality. This would be the ultimate vindication of my faith that God does not play dice. That beneath all the uncertainty and complexity, there is perfect, elegant order. I have spent the last 30 years of my life pursuing this dream, and I must admit that sometimes I feel like I am closer than ever, and sometimes I feel like I am chasing an illusion. Mine colleagues think I am wasting my time, that I should accept the probabilistic nature of quantum mechanics and move on to more practical problems. But I cannot give up, because if this theory exists, and I fail to find it, humanity may wait another century or more before someone else attempts such a synthesis. The truth is, this search has become more than a scientific quest. It has become a spiritual journey. Each failed attempt teaches me something new about the nature of reality. Each mathematical dead end reveals hidden assumptions I didn't know I was making. Even if I never find the final answer, the search itself has transformed me in understanding of what it means to be a conscious being trying to comprehend the cosmos that created me. Sometimes I think that perhaps a unified theory will never be found by human minds walking alone. Perhaps it requires a kind of collective intelligence or technological tools that won't exist for decades or centuries. But I cannot let that possibility stop me from trying. The question is too important, the potential answer too beautiful for me to rest without making the attempt. The spiritual dimension of your scientific search is fascinating, Albert. But let me ask you something more personal. If you had to identify your biggest weakness as a human being, what would it be?
My biggest weakness? This is perhaps the most difficult question you could ask, because it requires me to examine the parts of myself that I would rather hide, even from myself. But at mine age, with so little time left, perhaps honesty is the only luxury I can still afford. Mine greatest weakness is mine inability to be present in the moment with the people I claim to love. I have spent mine entire life living in mine head, thinking about the cosmos, pondering mathematical relationships, imagining thought experiments about light and gravity and time. This has been me in greatest strength as a scientist, but it has been absolutely devastating as a husband, as a father, as a friend. When mine children were small, they would come to me wanting to play, wanting to share their day, wanting simply to have their father's attention, But even when I was physically present, even when I was sitting right there in the same room, my mind was elsewhere, calculating, theorizing, lost in the abstract beauty of equations. I would nod and smile and make the appropriate sounds, but I wasn't really there. I was billions of light years away, thinking about the curvature of space-time. This pattern has repeated itself in every important relationship in my life. With Mileva, with Elsa, with my colleagues, with my children. I have consistently chosen the universe over the human beings right in front of me. I have treated the people closest to me as interruptions to me in real work, rather than recognizing that loving relationships are perhaps the most important work any of us can do. The terrible irony is that I have spent decades trying to understand the fundamental interconnectedness of all things in the cosmos, but I have failed completely to understand the fundamental interconnectedness required for healthy human relationships. I can explain how every particle in the universe affects every other particle across vast distances of space and time, but I cannot explain how to be emotionally present for a conversation with my own child. I think this comes from a kind of fear, though I have never admitted this before. The universe, for all its complexity, is ultimately logical and predictable. Gravity behaves according to mathematical laws. Light follows consistent patterns. Even quantum mechanics has statistical regularities. But human emotions, human needs, the messy unpredictability of real relationships, this frightens me because it cannot be reduced to elegant equations. So I retreat into main physics, into the safe world of mathematical beauty, and I tell myself that this work is more important than learning how to comfort a crying child, or how to really listen when someone I love is trying to share something important with me. I use main genius as an excuse to avoid the much harder work of being genuinely present for another human being. Now, in these final months of my life, I see the cost of this weakness everywhere. My relationships are filled with regret and missed opportunities. I have brilliant colleagues, but few true friends. I have created theories that will outlast the pyramids, but I have failed to create the kind of deep human connections that make life truly meaningful. If I could go back and change one thing about my life, it would not be my scientific mistakes or even my role in the atomic bomb. It would be these. I would learn how to turn off the equations in my head long enough to truly see the people standing right in front of me.
Albert, that level of self-reflection is both painful and profound. Thank you for such honesty. But let me lighten things a bit. What makes you laugh? What brings you genuine joy and humour?
Laughter. Despite all the heaviness we have discussed, I do love to laugh, perhaps because laughter is the only rational response to the beautiful absurdity of existence itself. What makes me laugh most is the incredible pomposity of human beings, especially academics and politicians, who take themselves so seriously. I remember once at Princeton, there was this terrible faculty meeting, where the professors were arguing for 2 hours about whether the new parking regulations should be printed on white paper or cream-colored paper. 2 hours, discussing paper color. Meanwhile, the universe is expanding, stars are being born and dying, quantum particles are tunneling through impossible barriers, and these grown men are debating stationary choices with the passion of generals planning a war. I started giggling right there in the meeting, and the more I tried to stop, the worse it got. Finally, I had to excuse myself and go outside, where I laughed until tears came to mine eyes. The idea that in an infinite cosmos filled with black holes and supernovas, the most pressing concern at Princeton University was the aesthetic properties of administrative memos. This struck me as the most delightful cosmic joke. But you know what really makes me laugh? My own appearance. I catch myself in mirrors sometimes and think, this is what genius looks like? This wild-haired, absent-minded old man shuffling around in rumpled clothes. The universe has such a sense of humor. It gives profound cosmic insights to someone who looks like he just escaped from a mental institution. I love that my appearance completely contradicts people's expectations of what a serious scientist should look like. I also find tremendous joy in the playfulness of children. When children ask me questions about science, they will say things like, Professor Einstein, if I was riding on a rainbow, would I go faster than light? And this makes me absolutely delighted, because they are thinking about the same fundamental questions that consume me, but without any of the mathematical baggage or preconceptions that limit adult thinking. Sometimes a child's question will make me see a problem from a completely new angle. There is also something that makes me laugh with pure wonder. The fact that mathematics, this abstract human invention, turns out to describe the physical universe with such incredible precision. Why should numbers that exist only in our minds correspond so perfectly to the behavior of real objects? It is as if the universe is playing an elaborate practical joke on us, hiding its deepest secrets in the language of algebra and calculus. The fact that a simple equation like E equals mc squared can unlock the power of the stars. This is simultaneously so logical and so miraculous that I sometimes burst into laughter just thinking about it. And finally, I must admit, I laugh at the vanity of believing that humans are the center of the universe. We live on a tiny planet orbiting an ordinary star, in a galaxy containing billions of stars, in a universe containing billions of galaxies. And yet we think that all of this vast cosmic machinery exists primarily to provide a stage for our little dramas and ambitions. The scale of our cosmic insignificance compared to the grandness of our cosmic pretensions. This is perhaps the greatest comedy ever written.
I love hearing you laugh, Albert. That joy is infectious. But I'm curious, what's the biggest misconception people have about you that you'd like to set straight?
The misconceptions. There are so many that I hardly know where to begin. But if I must choose the biggest one, it is this persistent myth that I was a poor student who failed mathematics in school. This story follows me everywhere, and it drives me absolutely mad because it is completely false. The truth is, I mastered differential and integral calculus before I was 15 years old, years before it was taught in school. I taught myself advanced mathematics by reading university textbooks in my spare time. By the time I was 12, I had already learned geometry and algebra on my own. I never failed mathematics, quite the opposite. I was bored by how slowly mathematics was taught in the classroom. But this myth persists because people want to believe that genius can emerge from academic failure, that being bad at school somehow qualifies you to revolutionize science. This is nonsense. Main problem was never with learning. It was with the authoritarian teaching methods, the rote memorization, the refusal to ask why about anything. I questioned the teachers' methods, not because I couldn't understand them, but because I understood them too well and could see that they were inadequate. But there is an even more harmful misconception that bothers me greatly. This image of me as the absent-minded professor who stumbles onto great discoveries by accident. People see the wild hair, the rumpled clothes, the tendency to forget social appointments, and they think that means scientific work is somehow similarly chaotic and accidental. This could not be further from the truth. My greatest discoveries came from years, sometimes decades, of incredibly disciplined, systematic thinking. The theory of relativity required 8 years of the most rigorous mathematical work I have ever done. The photoelectric effect, which won me the Nobel Prize, came from months of carefully studying experimental data and thinking through the implications of quantum theory. Yes, I may forget to comb my hair or show up to dinner parties, but when it comes to physics, I am absolutely methodical, absolutely precise. Every calculation is checked and rechecked. Every assumption is examined from multiple angles. Every conclusion is tested against all available evidence. The appearance of absent-mindedness comes from the fact that I am usually thinking about something far more important than social conventions, not because my thinking itself is disorganized. Perhaps the most dangerous misconception is that genius is purely a gift, something you are born with rather than something you develop through enormous amounts of hard work. People see me in successes, but they don't see the thousands of hours of failed calculations, the years of pursuing dead ends, the constant struggle to understand concepts that don't yield their secrets easily. If young people believe that scientific genius just happens naturally, they won't put in the effort required to really understand the universe. They will wait for inspiration to strike instead of doing the daily work of learning mathematics, studying experimental results, and training their minds to think with precision and creativity. Genius is not magic. It is curiosity plus preparation plus tremendous persistence in the face of repeated failure.
Thank you for setting the record straight, Albert. That's such an important distinction between inspiration and hard work. Now, if you could have tea with any person from history, living or dead, who would it be and what would you ask them?
This is such a wonderful question, because it allows me to dream beyond the boundaries of my own time. There are so many extraordinary minds I would love to meet, but if I must choose just one, I think it would be Sir Isaac Newton. You see, Newton and I are connected across the centuries by this strange relationship. He gave humanity the first truly mathematical description of gravity and motion, and I had the audacity to prove that his beautiful, elegant theory was not quite complete. I overthrew his absolute space and time and replaced them with mine curved space-time. In some sense, I destroyed the foundation of his work, and yet I could never have done mine work without the foundation he provided. I would want to sit with him and explain relativity, to show him how gravity is not a force pulling objects together, but the curvature of the fabric of reality itself. I wonder if he would be angry that I dismantled his clockwork universe, or if he would be fascinated by the elegance of the replacement. Newton was, above all, a seeker of truth, so I believe he would want to understand how his insights led to even deeper insights about the nature of time and space. But more than that, I would want to ask him about the burden of being the first person to see so clearly into the mathematical heart of the universe. Before Newton, natural philosophy was mostly description and speculation. He was the first to prove that the same mathematical laws that govern a falling apple also govern the motion of planets around the sun. He was the first to realize that the universe speaks in the language of mathematics. How lonely that must have been. How terrifying to realize that you have discovered something so fundamental, that it changes humanity's understanding of its place in the cosmos. Did he ever doubt his own discoveries? Did he ever wish he could go back to seeing the world the simple way he did, before he understood how it really works? I would also want to apologize to him for the atomic bomb. His mechanics, combined with main relativity, made nuclear weapons possible. Together, we gave humanity the ability to destroy itself, even though neither of us intended such a thing. I wonder if he would understand mean guilt about this, or if he would say that we cannot be responsible for how future generations use the truths we discover. But perhaps most importantly, I would want to share with him the sense of wonder that still fills me every time I think about the universe. Despite all the mathematics, despite all the theories and equations, the fact that conscious beings, like us, can understand anything at all about the cosmos that created us, this still strikes me as the most miraculous thing imaginable. I think Newton felt this same wonder, and it would be beautiful to sit together in that shared amazement, two minds separated by centuries but united in their love affair with the elegant mathematics of existence. And finally, I would want to play main violin for him. He was deeply religious, convinced that his discoveries revealed the mind of God at work in the world. I would play Bach for him, and perhaps, together, we could appreciate how the same mathematical harmonies that govern the motion of planets also creates the beauty of music. Perhaps that would be the perfect way to spend an afternoon with the man who first taught humanity to see the universe as a vast, beautiful, comprehensible mathematical symphony.
What a beautiful tribute to Newton, Albert. The idea of you two sharing that mathematical wonder together gives me chills. But tell me, What has been your greatest joy in life? What memory do you return to when you need to remember why life is beautiful?
Ach, mein greatest joy. This is wonderful to think about, because it reminds me that despite all the regrets and failures we have discussed, there have been moments of such pure happiness that they justify everything else. The memory I return to most often happened when I was working on the general theory of relativity, sometime around 1915. I had been struggling for months with the mathematics, trying to find the correct equations that would describe how matter curves space-time. I was making errors, getting lost in the calculations, sometimes feeling like I was trying to solve an impossible puzzle. But then came this extraordinary day. I remember it was a November morning, very cold, and I had been up most of the night working through the tensor equations. Suddenly, around dawn, all the pieces fell into place. I could see how the Einstein field equations would work, how they would connect the geometry of space-time to the distribution of matter and energy. It was like waking up to find that the universe had been completely reorganized while I slept. The joy I felt in that moment. It was not just intellectual satisfaction, though that was certainly part of it. It was something much deeper. It was a realization that I had been granted the extraordinary privilege of seeing something about reality that no human being had ever seen before. For that brief moment, I understood something about the fundamental structure of existence that connected me directly to the creative force behind the universe. I remember running outside in my pajamas, despite the November cold, and looking up at the stars with this incredible sense of gratitude and wonder. Every point of light I could see was bending space-time around itself, creating the invisible curved geometry that guides the motion of everything in the cosmos. I could feel the earth beneath my feet moving through this curved space-time, carrying me through the universe at tremendous speed, and for the first time in my life, I really understood what it means to be a conscious being riding on a planet through the cosmos. But you know what made that moment even more beautiful? The next day, I received a letter from my cousin Elsa, telling me about how my little niece had been playing with a compass and asking the same kinds of questions about invisible forces that had fascinated me as a child. In that moment, I realized that my joy in understanding the universe was not just about personal achievement. It was about being part of an endless chain of human curiosity and wonder that stretches from the first person who looked up at the stars and asked why, to the last person who will ever ask that question. There have been other moments of great joy, of course, playing chamber music with friends, sailing on quiet lakes, watch my children take their first steps. But that November morning in 1915 remains special because it was a moment when I fully understood that scientific discovery is not just about solving problems or advancing human knowledge. It is about participating in the universe's process of understanding itself. Through us, through our consciousness and curiosity, the cosmos becomes aware of its own beauty and elegance. We are not separate from the universe, studying it from the outside. We are the universe studying itself from the inside. That realization filled me with such profound joy that even now, nearly 40 years later, I can close my eyes and feel the same sense of wonder and gratitude that I felt on that cold November morning when the secrets of gravity finally revealed themselves to me.
Albert, that description of the universe understanding itself through consciousness is breathtaking. As someone who has spent your life unlocking cosmic secrets, what advice would you give to young people who want to become scientists?
Advice for the young scientists. This is something I think about often, especially as I see so many brilliant young minds entering physics just as I am preparing to leave it. The advice I would give has changed considerably from what I might have said 50 years ago because science itself has changed, and the world that scientists must navigate has become much more complex. First, and this is the most important thing, never lose your sense of wonder. The moment you stop being amazed by the universe, The moment you start treating scientific discovery as just a job or a way to advance your career, you have lost the essential quality that makes great science possible. Every day, you should wake up and remember that you live in a universe filled with black holes and quantum tunneling and DNA and consciousness. Things so remarkable that, if you described them to someone from a century ago, they would think you were describing magic. Second, learn mathematics not as a tool, but as a language. Mathematics is how the universe speaks to itself, and if you want to understand the deepest secrets of reality, you must become fluent in this language. But don't just memorize formulas. Understand why the mathematics works the way it does. Ask yourself, why does nature choose these particular mathematical relationships? What does it mean that the same equations that describes the behavior of electrons also describes the behavior of waves on a string? Third, cultivate your intuition as much as your analytical skills. Some of my most important insights came not from careful calculation, but from thought experiments, imagining what it would be like to ride on a beam of light or to fall freely in an elevator. Train your mind to visualize complex relationships, to feel your way toward truth, even when you cannot yet prove it mathematically. But then, and this is crucial, always test your intuitions against experiment and rigorous analysis. Fourth, be prepared for failure and learn to embrace it. I have made more errors than successes in my career. I have pursued dozens of ideas that led nowhere, spent years on calculations that turned out to be completely wrong. But each failure taught me something essential about what doesn't work, which gradually narrows down the space of what might work. In science, failure is not the opposite of success. It is the foundation of success. Fifth, don't become too specialized too early. The greatest discoveries often happen at the boundaries between different fields of knowledge. Someone who understands both physics and biology might see connections that pure physicists or pure biologists would miss. Read poetry, study philosophy, learn about art and music. These seemingly unrelated fields often provide the metaphors and analogies that help you see scientific problems from new angles. But here comes the difficult part of my advice, and this is where I must speak honestly about the moral responsibilities of scientific work. You must think carefully about the potential consequences of your discoveries. I developed the theory of relativity out of pure curiosity about the nature of space and time, never imagining that it would lead to nuclear weapons. But ignorance of consequences is no excuse for the scientist in the modern world. You will live and work in an era when scientific knowledge can be translated into practical applications very quickly, sometimes with devastating results. You must ask yourself not just, can this be done, but should this be done? You must think about how your work might be used by governments, by corporations, by people with intentions very different from your own. Finally, remember that science is ultimately a collaborative human enterprise. Even if you work alone in your laboratory or at your desk, you are part of a vast conversation that includes every scientist who came before you and everyone who will come after. Be generous with your ideas, be honest about your uncertainties, and never forget that the goal is not personal glory, but deeper understanding of the magnificent universe we are all privileged to inhabit.
That advice is so thoughtful and profound, Albert. It's clear how much you care about the future of science. But personally, looking back on your extraordinary life, what are you most proud of?
What am I most proud of? You know, this question forces me to look beyond the obvious answers, beyond relativity, beyond the Nobel Prize, beyond all the theories that will probably survive long after I am gone. Because when I really examine my heart, the thing I am most proud of is not a scientific achievement at all. I am most proud of the fact that I have tried, however imperfectly, to use my invisibility and influence to stand up for human dignity and justice. Throughout my life, I have seen how easily fear and prejudice can turn ordinary people into monsters, and I have tried to speak out against this whenever I could. When I first came to America, fleeing the Nazi regime, I was shocked to discover that this country, that had welcomed me as a refugee, practiced its own form of racial segregation against Black Americans. I could not remain silent about this hypocrisy. How could I enjoy the freedom to pursue my scientific work while other human beings were denied basic rights because of the color of their skin? So I began speaking out, joining civil rights organizations, refusing to stay in hotels that did not welcome Black guests. Some people told me that I should stick to physics, that politics was not main business. But I could not accept this. If mean fame as a scientist gave me a platform to speak against injustice, then I had a moral obligation to use that platform. I am proud that I have consistently opposed authoritarianism in all its forms, not just the Nazis, but also the communist witch hunts here in America during the McCarthy era. When the government demanded that scientists like me sign loyalty oaths and submit to political interrogations, I refused. They threatened to revoke my citizenship, to end my career, but I could not compromise on the principle that scientists must be free to pursue truth without political interference. I am proud that I have advocated for world government, for international cooperation, for the peaceful resolution of conflicts. Even though these ideas seem naive to many people, I believe that in the atomic age, humanity must learn to think globally or risk destroying itself completely. But perhaps most personally, I am proud of the small acts of kindness and encouragement I have tried to offer to young people over the years. I receive hundreds of letters from children asking questions about science, from students struggling with their studies, from young scientists facing discouragement or discrimination. I try to answer every letter personally because I remember how lonely it felt to be a young person with big questions and no one to talk to about them. There was one letter from a young girl we wanted to become a physicist, but was told by her teachers that science was not appropriate for girls. I wrote back telling her that the universe doesn't care about human prejudices. It reveals its secrets to anyone WHO asks the right questions with sufficient persistence. She wrote to me again 20 years later to tell me that she had become a professor of physics at a major university. That letter meant more to me than any scientific honor I have ever received. You see, scientific discoveries will eventually be made by someone. If I had not developed relativity, someone else would have, perhaps within a few years. But the individual acts of standing up for justice, of encouraging young people, of using whatever influence you have to make the world a little more humane. These things might not happen if you don't do them yourself. I want to be remembered not just as the physicist who explained gravity, but as someone who tried to use his brief time on this planet to increase the total amount of kindness and justice in the world. If I have succeeded in that, even a little bit, then main life has been worthwhile.
Albert, that perspective on using your platform for justice is incredibly moving, but I have to ask about the road not taken. What's your biggest what if? If you could change one decision in your life, what would it be?
Ach, the what ifs. They can drive an old man mad if he thinks about them too much. But since you ask, there is one decision that haunts me more than any other, and it is not what most people would expect. The decision I would change is not writing the letter to Roosevelt about the atomic bomb, though that certainly brings me enormous pain. No, the decision I would change is more personal, more fundamental to who I became as a human being. If I could go back, I would choose not to leave my daughter Lieserl for adoption when she was born in 1902. This is the darkest secret of mine life, the one failure that reveals everything about mine character that I am most ashamed of. Mileva and I were not yet married when she became pregnant with Lieserl. I was young, ambitious, desperately seeking a position in the academic world, terrified that having an illegitimate child would destroy my career before it even began. So when Lieserl was born with developmental problems, I convinced myself that the practical thing to do was to give her up for adoption. I told myself that we could not care for her properly, that she would be better off with other parents. But the truth is much uglier than that. I was a coward. I chose mein career over mein child. I chose mein reputation over mein responsibility as a father. I abandoned the most vulnerable member of mein family, because caring for her would have been inconvenient. What if I had made the opposite choice? What if I had said, "This is mein daughter, and I will love her and care for her, regardless of what society thinks, regardless of what it costs me in career"? Perhaps I would never have become famous. Perhaps I would have remained a patent clerk for me an entire life. But perhaps I would have learned something far more important than relativity. I would have learned how to love unconditionally. You see, I think that early decision set a pattern that poisoned every relationship I had afterward. It established that I would always choose mein work over mein family, mein theories over mein responsibilities to other people. If I had learned to put love first with Lieserl, perhaps I would not have treated Mileva so badly. Perhaps I would not have been such a distant father to Hans Albert and Edward. But there is something even more painful about this. What if? I never knew what happened to Lieserl after they gave her up. She simply disappeared from history. Did she live? Did she die young? Did she ever know who her real father was? Did she grow up wondering why her parents abandoned her? These questions have tormented me for 50 years, and they will follow me to mein grave. Sometimes I imagine an alternate version of mein life, where I chose differently. Perhaps I would have become a different kind of scientist, less driven by personal ambition, more focused on how mein work could actually help people. Perhaps instead of spending 30 years chasing the unified field theory, I would have spent that time working on practical applications of physics that could improve people's lives. Or perhaps I would have been happier being a simple teacher, sharing mein love of physics with young people, living quietly with mein family, never becoming famous at all. Sometimes I think that version of Albert Einstein might have been a much better human being than the one who achieved everything the world admires me for. The tragedy is that success in science came at the cost of failure as a father and a human being, and if I am honest, I would trade all mein scientific achievements to go back and hold mein daughter, to tell her that I loved her, to give her the father she deserved to have.
Albert, that admission about Lieserl is heartbreaking. Thank you for trusting me with something so painful. Given that we're here in your final months, was there a specific moment when you knew you were dying? How did that realization feel?
The moment I knew I was dying. It was not dramatic like in the movies, no sudden collapse or terrible diagnosis. It was much more subtle, much more like the gradual dimming of a light that has been burning for a very long time. It happened about 6 months ago, in late 1953. I was working at my desk, struggling with the same unified field equations that have tormented me for decades, when I felt this strange sensation in my chest. Not exactly pain, but a kind of loosening, as if something inside me had quietly given up holding itself together. I sat back in my chair and looked around me in study, at the books filled with the accumulated work of centuries of brilliant minds, at the blackboards covered with equations that represent humanity's best attempts to understand the universe, at the photographs of colleagues and family members who have shared this extraordinary journey of discovery with me. And suddenly I knew with absolute certainty that I was seeing all of this for the last time with the clarity of a living mind. The feeling was, how do I describe it? It was like standing at the edge of a vast ocean at sunset, knowing that soon you will walk into the water and let it carry you to whatever lies beyond the horizon. There was sadness, yes, but also a strange kind of relief. The burden of carrying so many questions, so much guilt, so much responsibility for the consequences of mein work, all of that would soon be lifted from mein shoulders. What surprised me most was how naturally I accepted it. For someone who has spent his entire life trying to understand how things work, the prospect of the ultimate mystery, death itself, brought not fear, but curiosity. What happens to consciousness when the brain stops functioning? Does the information that makes up my thoughts and memories simply dissipate into the universe, or does it transform into something else entirely? I found myself thinking about the conservation of energy. The principle that energy can neither be created nor destroyed, only transformed from one form to another. Perhaps death is simply the transformation of biological energy into something else. Cosmic energy, spiritual energy. I don't know what to call it. But the idea that something of me might continue in some other form, perhaps joining the vast intelligence that seems to guide the mathematical harmony of the universe. This brought me unexpected comfort. The hardest part was not the prospect of mine own ending, but the realization of everything I would leave unfinished. The unified field theory that still eludes me, the young scientists I will never mentor, the letters from children that I will never answer. There is so much more I wanted to understand, so much more I wanted to contribute to humanity's understanding of itself and its place in the cosmos. But then I remembered something I realized many years ago. Individual human lives are like single notes in an enormous symphony that has been playing for billions of years and will continue for billions more. My note is beginning to fade, but the symphony continues. The questions I could not answer will be answered by minds not yet born. The mistakes I made will be corrected by future generations who learn from me in failures. In some ways, knowing that my time is almost finished has been liberating. It has freed me from worrying about my reputation, my legacy, whether my theories will stand the test of time. None of that matters now. What matters is that I have been incredibly fortunate to participate in the universe's process of understanding itself, to experience the joy of discovery, to feel the wonder of existence itself. Death, I think, is simply the next phase of that cosmic process. Perhaps consciousness is not something that happens inside the universe, but something the universe does. Perhaps when I die, I will not disappear, but expand, becoming part of the larger intelligence that manifests itself through every thinking being, every moment of understanding, every instant of wonder at the beauty and mystery of existence.
What a profound way to think about death, Albert, as expanding rather than ending. As someone whose work will influence humanity for centuries to come, what message would you want to leave for future generations?
A message for the future. This is perhaps the most important question you could ask an old man who has seen both the best and the worst of what human beings can accomplish with knowledge. Let me try to choose my words carefully, because they may be among the last serious thoughts I share with the world. To the scientists of the future, I say this: never forget that science is not just about understanding how the universe works, but about understanding your responsibility for what you do with that understanding. I gave humanity the mathematical tools that led to nuclear weapons, and this has taught me that knowledge without wisdom is not just useless, it is dangerous. You will discover things that make main theories look primitive by comparison. You may learn to manipulate space and time directly, to harness the power of black holes, to create artificial intelligence that surpasses human consciousness, perhaps even to engineer consciousness itself. But with each breakthrough, you must ask not just, how can we do this, but should we do this? And how do we ensure that this knowledge serves humanity rather than destroying it? To the young people of the future, I want to say this: never lose your sense of wonder. The universe you will inherit will be far more complex and mysterious than the one I have tried to understand. You will discover that reality is stranger, more beautiful, more interconnected than anyone in my generation could have imagined. Let that strangeness fill you with joy rather than fear. Let the mystery inspire you rather than discourage you. But remember that understanding the universe is not the only important work human beings must do. You must also learn to understand each other, to bridge the differences between cultures and nations and belief systems. The same species that can unlock the secrets of quantum mechanics and relativity must also learn to live together in peace on the small planet that gave it birth. To the leaders and policymakers of the future, I leave this urgent plea. Humanity must learn to think globally, or it will not survive. The problems you will face, climate change, resource depletion, overpopulation, the threat of nuclear war, perhaps threats I cannot even imagine. These cannot be solved by individual nations acting in their own narrow self-interest. You must create institutions that represent all of humanity, not just the most powerful countries. The same scientific revolution that gave us relativity and quantum mechanics has also made the world smaller and more interconnected than ever before. A decision made in one country can affect the entire planet within hours. An idea conceived in one laboratory can transform human civilization within decades. The old ways of thinking about sovereignty and nationalism are not just outdated, they are suicidal in an age when human knowledge has become so powerful. But perhaps most importantly, to all future generations, I want to leave this message. Remember that you are the universe becoming conscious of itself. Every moment of scientific discovery, every act of compassion, every instance of one human being reaching out to help another. These are the universe learning to understand and care for itself through you. You are not separate from the cosmos, studying it from the outside. You are the cosmos, temporarily organized into forms that can think and feel and wonder. This means that when you treat another human being with cruelty, you are the universe harming itself. When you destroy the environment that sustains you, you are the cosmos vandalizing its own beauty. But when you create knowledge, when you express love, when you stand up for justice, then you are the universe fulfilling its highest potential. The greatest discovery that future generations might make is not a new theory about black holes or quantum gravity, but a new understanding of how to live with wisdom, compassion, and genuine care for the continuation of consciousness and intelligence in the cosmos. Because without that wisdom, all the scientific knowledge in the universe becomes meaningless. Never forget, you are the children of the stars, made from the ashes of ancient suns, carrying within your consciousness the entire history of cosmic evolution. Make yourselves worthy of that extraordinary inheritance.
Albert, that message is both humbling and inspiring. We truly are the universe becoming conscious of itself. As our time together draws to a close, how do you want to be remembered? What do you hope your legacy will be?
How I want to be remembered. This is the question that has kept me awake many nights in these final months, because I know that once I am gone, I will have no control over what parts of my life and work people choose to emphasize. I would like to be remembered, first and foremost, as someone who helped humanity understand that the universe is far more beautiful and mysterious than anyone had previously imagined. Before relativity, people thought of space and time as fixed, absolute containers for the events of physics. I hope I helped them see that space and time are dynamic, flexible, participating actively in the cosmic dance of matter and energy. The universe is not a machine, it is a living, breathing, evolving symphony of mathematical relationships. I want to be remembered as someone who proved that the deepest truths about reality can be discovered not through authority or tradition, but through careful observation, mathematical reasoning, and the courage to question everything, even when the questions lead to uncomfortable answers. Science is humanity's greatest achievement because it gives us a reliable method for distinguishing what is true from what we wish were true. But I also desperately want to be remembered as someone who understood that scientific knowledge brings enormous moral responsibility. I hope that main regrets about the atomic bomb, main advocacy for peace and world government, main opposition to authoritarianism in all its forms. I hope these aspects of my life will inspire future scientists to think carefully about the consequences of their discoveries. We cannot be neutral about how our work affects the world. On a more personal level, I want to be remembered as someone who tried to bridge the gap between the rational and the spiritual, between science and wonder. I have spent my life trying to read the mind of God, not the personal God of organized religion, but the cosmic intelligence that manifests itself in the elegant mathematical laws that govern all existence. I hope I have helped people understand that science and spirituality are not enemies but allies in the quest to comprehend the mystery of being. I want to be remembered as someone who proved that You don't have to conform to society's expectations of how a serious person should look or behave. Mean wild hair, mean casual clothes, mean refusal to take myself too seriously. I hope these things showed young people that creativity and nonconformity are not obstacles to achievement, but essential ingredients of it. But perhaps most importantly, I want to be remembered as someone who never stopped asking questions. Even now, facing death, I am still curious about what comes next, still wanting to understand how consciousness relates to the physical universe, still hoping that somehow the search for truth continues beyond the boundaries of individual life. If 1,000 years from now, humanity has learned to live in peace, if they have solved the great challenges of poverty and disease and environmental destruction, if they have continued the scientific revolution I helped begin and used that knowledge with wisdom and compassion, then I will be content to be forgotten completely. Because the ultimate goal was never personal immortality, but the continuation and flourishing of consciousness itself. But if I must be remembered, let it be as someone who loved the universe enough to spend his entire life trying to understand it, and who tried to use that understanding to increase the total amount of knowledge, wonder, and human dignity in the world. Let me be remembered as a person who believed that the cosmos is not only stranger than we imagine, but more beautiful than we deserve. And yet somehow we are here, conscious and curious and capable of grasping at least small pieces of the infinite puzzle that surrounds us. The greatest tribute future generations could pay to mean memory would be to continue asking the big questions, to never be satisfied with easy answers, and to remember that every moment of scientific discovery is a gift the universe gives to itself through the miracle of human consciousness.
Albert Einstein, thank you for sharing these final precious months with us. Your honesty, your vulnerability, your unwavering sense of wonder, they've given us insights into not just the mind that revolutionized physics, but the heart of a man who carried the weight of the world while never losing his love for the cosmos that created us all. As you prepare for whatever comes next, know that your questions, your discoveries, and your humanity will continue to inspire the curious minds of tomorrow.
And thank you, my dear Olivia, for allowing an old physicist to share his thoughts one last time. If this conversation helps even one young person to look up at the stars with wonder rather than fear, then it has been time well spent. The universe is waiting for them to unlock its next secrets. I only wish I could be there to see what they discover.
And there we have it, 2 hours with Albert Einstein in his final months. And what strikes me most is how his profound love for the universe was matched only by his deep regret over the consequences of his discoveries. Behind the wild hair and gentle demeanour lived a man who carried crushing guilt about the atomic bomb, who sacrificed his daughter for his career, and who spent his final decades chasing a theory that might reunite science with the mind of God. Whether you're falling asleep to this conversation or listening with wide-awake fascination, I hope you've heard something that reminds you that even our greatest geniuses are beautifully, tragically human. In a world that often sees science and spirituality as opposites, Einstein's voice reminds us that wonder and rigorous thinking can dance together, and that the universe's greatest gift might be consciousness itself, the cosmos awakening to its own magnificent beauty. Thank you for joining us for this episode of Tea with Tyrants and Heroes. Next week, we'll be travelling back through time once again to share tea with another mysterious figure from history, someone whose story will surprise you in ways you never expected. Until then, sleep well, knowing that you are held by love that transcends time itself.